Today on MS Refresh, part 2 of our deep dive into Microsoft's AI announcements, this time covering Power Platform, Microsoft's low-code automation ecosystem, plus some tangible news on Teams 2.0. Was the hype worth the wait? Ooh. All that and more. Subscribe to stay in the know. This is the MS Refresh Show. Hi there and welcome to the Matt and Sean 365 Refresh Show. This is episode 83 covering the recent announcement of Microsoft's AI features coming to Microsoft's Power Platform. Coming to you from the East Coast, my name is Matt Wade.
And as always from the West Coast, I'm Sean Bugler. We're back.
We are. Sorry for a bit of a delay there. Real life gets in the way sometimes. It's just amazing.
I'm not sorry.
See, I would like to hold everybody in my life accountable for not allowing me to see you more often, Sean, okay?
You as well. You should. You tell your fiance to back off.
Seriously, it's not even her. It's real life, work, all that stuff. But it's nice to be back with you.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you, and it's been interesting to see the conversation evolve. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about over these last 2 weeks or so. So I have to lead with this initial question: do you feel like the AI event was as big as we thought it was when we were covering it? Because you always kind of see the ripple effects after.
So I think that in our last episode, we were definitely fanboying about this technology and how it's probably a turning point in the history of computing. I think that is still a valid thought. And it's not like we've seen a whole bunch of additional use cases or anything in Copilot specifically, but I still think, I'm definitely using Bing AI more and more these days for, either helping me craft wording or, build out and not have to use brain power for the creative process,
right?
The content building process. And it's a major game changer, I think, for a lot of stuff, as long as you're willing to use it and you remember to go use it. I think the hardest part is the prompting, is trying to get what you want out of it and having to think through. Right. Ask what you want to ask. Don't ask something not tangential to the idea, but you need to actually be 100% clear to get the answer that you want.
Right. Which is interesting because I think business communication 101 for so many of us has been dance around the point. Don't be so direct in your I need this. But somebody gave me some interesting advice a couple days ago, which was talk to these AIs the same way an executive would fire off an email.
Directly to the point. Yeah,
just get right to the point. And obviously, I think that'll probably evolve to some degree.
Yeah,
there's going to be, depending on the platform that you're using, you'll probably want to give a little bit more context. You'll probably want to be direct with the question, but you might say, here's the specific format. So there's like a micromanaged component to it as well, which is probably not the best muscle for us to be building, but
right. or we're going to stop working real muscles, and we're going to forget how to do certain things, which I think is okay. I think it's the argument for it's okay to bring a calculated math class. I think especially in an advanced math class, right? I'm going to have this; it's going to be available to me for the rest of my life, unless a meteor takes out 80% of humanity. That trusty TI-83 is still going to be available to me as long as I can get AA batteries. Okay.
I have a TA-84, thank you.
Well, I'm a little bit older than you, I think. Anyway, so
I just went back to school.
That's true. That's true. I haven't used mine in 10 years or more. It's a paperweight. It holds my door open.
The good news is it hasn't changed anything at all.
Right. Yeah. The things haven't changed. The price hasn't changed. It's insane. So today's episode, we're going to dive a bunch into the Power Platform aspects of the AI announcements. So last episode, we covered all the Microsoft 365 stuff. Copilot and Word, Teams, PowerPoint, things like that. Today, Sean gets to flex his Power Platform muscles and talk about what's coming to the Power Platform side of the AI stuff, which already had some AI stuff, right? AI Builder is a thing. It has been for a while. But before we get into that, two quick things. I know we'll probably get called out on this. Why are you not talking about? First off, Teams 2.0 was announced last week as being in public preview. It has been talked about for a very long time. Lots of major claims. The fact that the memory and CPU usage will be significantly lower. A lot of UX changes. So the channel listing or the conversation listing in a channel is now going to be most recent post on the top instead of the bottom, or conversation on the top as opposed to the bottom, which is causing some, I don't know, I've seen some strife on Twitter since then.
Consternation.
Which I think it's a better move. Bringing one of the big UX things for me is pulling the information pane from a channel out automatically, so that you can actually see pinned comments and other things that are useful to know about, almost like the Reddit sidebar. So it's not just hidden behind the little information button. But we will be talking about that in the near future, probably next episode. That is not going to be today. And if you are interested in hopping ahead, always keep in mind we do use chapters. We put a lot of time actually into our chapters. If you're not familiar with YouTube chapters, please do not complain about our back and forth at the beginning, because you are more than welcome to skip it if you'd like to. That's all I'm saying. The second topic,
like it's fine. Like it's
the second topic, no complaining, zero complaints. I can't complain, therefore you can't. Anyway, second topic is related to an event that you and I are going to next month, which is the end of this month, really. The Microsoft 365 conference in Las Vegas.
Yes.
And
very
that is
exciting.
This is apparently 2023 is a very big year of big changes to the Microsoft 365 platform. And one of those changes will be announced at the event, and that is for SharePoint. So back in, was it 2016 or 17 that SharePoint had?
2016, I want to say.
I think you're right. Yep, Future SharePoint event was in 2016. And there is going to be kind of another version of that. So I'm assuming kind of the modern version of SharePoint is being announced at Microsoft 365 conference. So if you want to hear about
I
it
hope
first,
that's the real name. Modern.
I want one of the moderns to be italicized. The first modern needs to be italicized for the brand to make sense to me. That's all I'm saying. But yeah, so there was an announcement from Jeff Teeper and Adam Harmitz earlier last week talking about the what's next for SharePoint, which there is a link in the show notes below. You can grab that if you want to take a look. It doesn't tell you much other than, hey, we did this once a number of years ago and we're going to do it again, and get excited and come be here live for it and be able to interact with our engineers and demo potentially with it on site at the MGM Grand in Vegas. So if you haven't signed up for that yet, definitely do so. Use that promo code WADE, WADE 100. That is the only promo code that works.
That's not true at all, because you can also use Bugler, BUGLER 100.
Yes,
and that will save you $100 and my adoring attention when I see you in Vegas. Come find. I'll buy you a drink. Like I don't care.
There you go. Yeah, I like it. Perfect. I can't wait to charge all the drinks to you. My drinks.
Damn it.
I'll find you. So definitely check that out. So Teams 2.0 we'll talk about in the near future. SharePoint 3.0. I don't know. What do you want? What are they going to call it?
I think they're going to call it the new SharePoint. That's what I'm gonna. I'm Babe Ruth in it.
Yeah.
I think they're just gonna call it the new SharePoint, because they've been moving away from like calling it like 2019 and all that fun stuff. I think they've already called it the modern SharePoint.
What do you think? Do you think they're going to say? I think they're going to announce like
there's
we're only going to host.
You
think so?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's no way I think that they are in a comfortable enough position to take that firm of a stance. They tried years ago, and that didn't work.
Yeah.
It may be less feature filled because so much of what's powering it is now in the cloud.
Yeah, totally.
It may just be more of what it is today, but I think they will offer an on-prem version with improved web parts.
One of the comments we got on the last episode was, did you notice how we didn't see any Viva references in the AI announcements? The only exception I think is Viva Sales, because there are some Dynamics 365 Copilot things and AI-based things. But I wonder if this will also include a number of AI-specific updates for Viva Topics, SharePoint Syntax, or Microsoft Syntax, because a lot of the stuff that they built, which was genius at the time, I feel like is kind of irrelevant's a super strong word in this situation, but I feel like they probably kind of have to build this from the ground up to get so many more and better features from the OpenAI services than they could with just that graph data that they had naturally within their own experience.
Yeah, I keep hearing rumblings that people are thinking Viva is going to get bigger, just dramatically bigger all of a sudden. And I think the only way that happens is if it envelops Teams, which I think is still a very likely end state, that Teams stops being Teams and it starts being like, Viva Chat or something like that.
Just Viva. That's what I'm saying, man.
Yeah, it probably, I mean, it's hard to envision an end state that doesn't, if Microsoft still has Teams centered in the middle of their future of collaboration.
Yeah.
It's hard to envision Viva the brand not enveloping Teams as well in order to get to that end state.
I agree.
No, it'll be interesting.
Cool. All right.
All that to say, yes, be there in May.
Yes.
It's going to be great.
Wade 100,
this is going to
Wade
be
100,
big...
Wade 100, Wade 100.
It's going to be big. It's going to be fun. And I think the amount of excitement that we're feeling is shared by many within the community, which means just being there is going to be fun. Like, set aside what's going to be talked about in the events. Just being there is going to be fun.
Totally agree with
so
that.
Bugler 100.
Wade 100. And why don't we bring this to the big topic of the day? You want to start jumping into some of the exciting things they announced for the Power Platform regarding AI?
Yeah. There's a lot of news.
There is. This is why we had to split it up. I mean, like, there's a lot of stuff out there.
So I think we'd be remiss if we didn't start with the continuation of what we had talked about in our last episode, which was Copilot, which is Microsoft's OpenAI kind of companion that's being bolted onto pretty much all of their marquee apps and services. So we saw last week or the week before, it's being bolted onto Excel, PowerPoint, Word, Teams, you name it. Like Microsoft they've got the welding gun and the helmet, and they are just welding it on there to see if they can enhance the value of these apps and services by just throwing AI at it. And the Power Platform is no different in most respects. So let's go ahead and start with what didn't get Copilot. What do you think about that, man?
Yeah, I think the things that haven't gotten touched are kind of interesting.
So the big one, I think, to both of us that did not get Copilot was Power BI. Mm-hmm. Power BI is, at least right now, not launching with Copilot. And Matt, you had an interesting theory as to why that is. Would you mind sharing with the class?
Well, I guess I'm assuming because it already has some of that natural language query feature set built into it, and has for, I want to say, a few years now. A couple years?
Yeah,
How long
yeah.
has that been? Yeah. That
it's
already
been a few years.
Yeah, that the tech that they're using for that is so ingrained into the system that they have to somehow detangle them, and that takes a lot more time to replace with something that is more groundbreaking, like the OpenAI services. So I'm assuming that they need more time to do that, and that the delta for what they'll get might be less because they already had a lot of those features. Now, they may not have been perfect, but they also weren't awful either. So to have that time to do that replacement and then get a bump of 60% as opposed to, well, for the other apps, infinity percent because they were at 0 before.
Right. Total greenfield.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it makes sense. Like Power BI had natural language processing. Was it great natural language processing? No, but it was functional. A lot of organizations have built workflows around it.
Yeah.
And
totally.
Microsoft is going to have to split the difference in terms of obviously adding net new functionality with respect to, I assume, as we'll talk about, the ability to create dashboards, the ability to iterate on dashboards and reports, but also to continue to allow organizations to clearly and consistently get the outputs that they need from, asking questions about the data, which is something you can do today.
Yeah. The other thing I just realized too, Power BI is unique in that it is the only installable Power Platform tool. So they're going to have to be careful about
Automate.
Well, yeah, but I mean like on-prem. So does not need to be internet connected.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So you can have a Power BI publishing service, locally on-prem if you want to, and it can potentially not touch the internet if you don't want it to. So they're going to have to be kind of careful about what can this service do if you are on an on-prem version that you're not going to allow to reach out to their, their grounding services via OpenAI.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, do you launch with natural language processing, which I believe is supported on the on-prem version because that's a simple model.
Right.
Or do you say like up, you got a hybrid bridge to the cloud?
Yeah. Right.
It'll be interesting to see the compromises they make. Do they kill functionality? Do we end up with an on-prem version that without the cloud is less capable?
Than
it was 4 years ago?
I think it will 100% be that way. Just what is it that they can or can't support?
Right. The second Power Platform pillar that did not launch with any form of Copilot, at least not yet, is Power Pages. Now, that one is less of a surprise because I think there is some sense that there isn't that product is still being built. It's capable of some key features, some core functionality, but there isn't a lot to do with it just yet. That isn't, this very like custom level of effort, which isn't where, as we'll talk about, isn't where Copilot shines just yet. Copilot shines at leveraging the tools that already exist, the 99% of features where the average user uses 10. That's Copilot shines. But
that's an interesting take, because I was actually thinking that because Power Pages is basically an offshoot of Power Apps, that it would be reasonably easy to incorporate those things. But you're right. That's I hadn't thought of it the way that you just said it.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, Power Pages is probably one of the areas where I would want Copilot most, because I'm not very well versed in what's possible.
And why learn it if you don't have to?
I would love that.
Seriously, though, like that's actually a really interesting concept, is that really proves the whole, like, you walk around with a calculator your whole life and never learn the math behind it,
Yeah. No, it'll be interesting to see. I don't expect we're going to see anything in May about this. I would expect if we're going to see anything with respect to Copilot for Power BI and Power Pages, it'll probably be at Ignite later this year.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the two Power Platform things that didn't get Copilot. The others, Power Automate, Power Apps, Power Virtual Agents, all had some level of Copilot integration announced.
Next generation AI and Power Platform is changing how you develop low-code applications. Now with Power Platform, you can use natural language to bring ideas to life in a new design experience. With Copilot and Power Apps, describe your app in a few simple words, and next generation AI will create your app and help you refine and update it. With Copilot and Power Automate, building flows to automate your world has never been easier. You can start by describing your process in a few simple sentences, and Power Automate will build your flow. With Copilot and Power Virtual Agents, building a complex chatbot to answer and manage internal and external conversations has never been simpler. And with the AI Builder, you have access to the Azure OpenAI model in a low-code experience to configure and embed next-generation AI to generate, summarize, classify, translate text, and more in your apps and flows in a few clicks. The future of low-code starts today. Imagine it, describe it, Power Platform builds it.
Matt, where do you want to start?
So I think the most, for me, as an actual no-code guy, I think the Power App stuff is super, super cool. I think Power Virtual Agents still has a bit of a gap for people to see like the value add of that. And I think Power Automate will still deal with all of the stupid little things in it that, time syntax and like things like that. And I'll still be kind of wary of those tool sets, but I think the Power App stuff is super cool. So let's start with that. So right out of the gate, Power Apps takes on a new feature with Copilot, which is the ability to, quotes here, create an app. And so this is, if you're familiar with Power Automate's describe it to design it, I'm going to put that in quotes as well, describe it to design it, because these are all like brand names and trademarks, apparently. Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that.
The create an app one is not, but the there's more.
Got it.
So the ability to create an app. So you in the Power Apps Maker portal, when you go to make.powerapps.com or whatever .gov.co.cs or whatever,
.us.
if you're in the public sector.
Go on.
you've got a text box and you can just type like, I need an app that displays X content, allows user to do X thing. And Power Apps will do its best to create a simple interface. It's not the most beautiful thing you'll ever see, but a simple interface that solves that need. So a couple of the examples that they give in the blog post, which we're linking in the show notes below. Create a time and expense application to enable my employees to submit their time and expense reports. Build an application to automate the manual process of creating and automating customer invoices. Generate an employee onboarding application to capture new hire information and share training content and learning modules. So, I mean, real world applications in a lot of, broadly speaking.
Those were three of the 5 examples that every single app, regardless of whether it's Microsoft or doesn't matter, they always use those as examples.
Always onboarding.
They never have more examples that, or they don't have the customer information to anyway, pet peeve of mine.
What do businesses do? They hire people.
Run with it. We just need the reimbursement app next, right? The travel reimbursement app.
The only one they were missing in this list of examples.
Right, because nobody uses Concur, of course. No, but anyway, go on.
Now, so from there, Power Apps will hold up an app that it says, hey, this is close to what you're talking about, right? And from there, you've got a little Copilot sidebar on the right, and you can say, it needs more data fields to capture X, Y, Z. And from there, it'll spit out an app. Now, what it's doing behind the scenes is it's really just generating a collection of Dataverse stuff. So it is pure play focused on the data aspects more than it is the app experience, the UI, to nobody's surprise. So it's, like I said, it's not going to be the prettiest thing you've ever gotten here, but much in the same way that Microsoft... No. Much in the same way that Microsoft is enabling the ability for people to take pictures of napkin sketches and upload it into Power Apps, or to upload a Figma data file. For those who aren't familiar, Figma is a really user-friendly and intuitive design application that they've partnered with, so you can create apps using just these wireframing tools and then upload that into Power Apps. In both of those instances, as with this one, this is just another accelerator to get you from nothing to something. There's a quote I love, which is, I don't know a lot about art, but I know what I like. And it's this idea of beating the blank canvas syndrome, which is so much of what AI is. It's getting over the hump of I have nothing. And then starting with, well, I wouldn't have done it that way.
I love that quote. That is that is the reason why the SharePoint lookbook was a game changer, because SharePoint, the start design of every homepage has been ugly since day one, and it's because it's been blank basically, or has very not useful things placed on it and doesn't show the actual potential of what that would have. I like that quote. That is that's how my design in my mind works, is that I know what I like when I see it, and if I can take that and run with it and steal inspiration from it, like every artist has in the history of humanity, that's a way to move things forward.
100%. And so, I mean, there is some real tangible utility here, even if it's not a pixel perfect output. And for those of you at home, feel free to steal that quote. I don't know who said it.
You did.
But
Sean Bugler,
2023. Attributed to Sean Bugler, parentheses, hopefully.
Bugler 100, right. So can I bring up the elephant in the room on this? I didn't think of it until you mentioned it. You see the video overviews of how the data magically just kind of, and toss sample information in there. And I just assumed that was all just, marketing graphics. But no, when you said Dataverse, because I'm thinking in my head, boy, how is AI going to know the intricacies of Microsoft lists? Because they're annoyingly difficult to deal with sometimes. And, all the back end features. And as you're saying that, the light bulb just went off to me. This is going to be Dataverse only probably, because why would they ever incentivize people to use a free data storage tool instead of their pay us indefinitely forever? That's redundant, but it really just kind of pushes the point there. Pay us forever to store your data, which I dislike for what it's worth.
Strongly. Yeah. Yeah. No, this is something people are going to have to square with really early. This is a capability. It's a robust capability, but it's one that is going to absolutely push the moneymakers for Microsoft. And they've been trying to push many of us over the cliff with respect to Dataverse. Yes, there's a ton of utility that they absolutely
totally get it.
Around.
Yeah.
But none of it, arguably, none of it couldn't have been matched or met to some degree on the Microsoft list sides of things. And there's got to be this incredible argument happening behind the scenes constantly, between the Microsoft lists team and executive leadership of the entire program, because it's like, no, like lists, you can't do that because now you're getting too close to what Dataverse, like the utility of what Dataverse does.
Yeah.
I would bet money that those arguments exist. If they have either they have already happened and everybody's resigned to the reality that lists is going to be kneecapped, or the arguments are ongoing and one day lists will launch some functionality that Dataverse has had for 5 years that they've just been sitting on.
Or it'll plateau, kind of similar to like Forms, right? Microsoft Forms is really easy to use and it plugs into Power Automate beautifully. So a lot of people will use that, but it doesn't, branching is there, but it doesn't have like data validation or, like input, confirm that a phone number is in the format of a phone number, an email address is a valid email address.
That's Dynamics functionality.
Right. That's Power Apps. Like then go off and use Power Apps and pay to use Power Apps, right? Like in theory, which is, I think those are, those are comparable things where Forms and lists are kind of going to plateau on what they provide. But so let me ask you this. When you're building Power Apps in your organization or you're working with people who are building them, how often do you use Dataverse in your everyday life?
So if you had asked me a year ago, I would have said outright, we don't. We try really hard not to.
Sure.
Because that creates a burden of responsibility to maintain on business units that today are focused on, I'm going to build you a car. I'm going to sell you the car. This is now your car.
Right.
And that's just not the case with the Dataverse. Like the business does not have that in-house expertise to take that on. So it is much easier to build with SharePoint as the data source, whether it's libraries or lists, because they see it. They know the UI. They're familiar with the UI. They can go into lists. They can see the data in real time. They can change the views and see what they need to see. Spit out reports into Excel with very little effort. And there's an app that happens to run on top of it. Yeah. For most of our Power Apps use cases, that's good enough. That's plenty. We are getting to a point where we're starting to really test the limits of what lists is capable of. And I know everybody's going to say lists are not a database. They are if you try hard enough.
Just like Excel is if you try hard enough, basically, right?
Right. Absolutely. And so we have found a couple of scenarios where it makes sense to offload this to Dataverse, those workloads to Dataverse. So we're starting to find those. And that's Microsoft's hope, is that businesses will find these organically and then they're going to have to neuter existing functionality in order to push more people in that direction. Yeah. But I will tell you, licensing is slowing us down.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
To nobody's surprise. Like licensing is slowing our ability to pursue these down. So what about you? What's your experience?
So with clients that I've been working with, the interesting thing is that so many of them have either a bad experience with SharePoint in the past, and especially if they use SharePoint lists to any extent, they think that that 5,000 view threshold is actually a hard limit. So they think that a list can't hold enough data. And I think Dataverse can only hold 1 million items per database, if I remember correctly. I think it's something like that. Whereas a list can hold 30 million, but like nobody really talks about that limit base. Now, of course, Microsoft lists aren't relational, but they basically can be if you have multiple lists being pinged by the same app. The app itself is what does the relationship, right? So it is relational once you make it so. But the interesting part is people are going out and sort of researching this themselves, and they'll come to our shared space and teams where we talk about building Power Platform solutions, or they go to our any of the internal resources I have been helping build for some clients. They'll come up and say, okay, well, what about Dataverse? And I'll be like, how have you heard of that? Because, Dataverse hasn't been released necessarily yet in some of these places. And it comes down to the marketing and the branding is so much clearer. Now, I realize Dataverse had to go through 5 names before it got to Dataverse, but that branding is very clear. And what's funny is that the Microsoft Lists branding is so generic because it doesn't represent that it's coming from SharePoint. And now, in theory, the SharePoint list branding is supposed to be dead. So most of the posts from Microsoft that say SharePoint lists are from like 5 or plus years ago.
Right.
So they're not relevant any longer. So the kind of interesting thing here, and I don't know if this was as evilly planned as it seems like it could be, but the fact that they went with such a generic name for Microsoft Lists and don't make it very obvious that Microsoft Lists connects very well to Power Platform, because keep in mind that connector in Power Platform is not Microsoft Lists, it is SharePoint. So if you can't make that connection, right, and it's all one connector, because it is still SharePoint stuff you're doing with that connector if you want to.
Right.
And I doubt they're going to split that up into two and make a SharePoint and a Lists connector, at least not anytime soon that I would think.
I don't know. I still feel like they should do that, but
I don't think that they shouldn't. I think they should. I just don't know if they will. Why would they want to? And then you get to the Dataverse question, because somebody, innocently will say, I want Dataverse, please give me Dataverse. And it's like, why? And they say, because that's what I need. I need a database for Power Platform stuff I'm working on. It's like, have you looked at Microsoft Lists yet? And, is that like a SharePoint list? Yeah, it's the same thing, just branded differently. Oh, well, I hate SharePoint, so I don't want to use that. And I don't want to be limited by 5,000. And it's just like, SharePoint has just always left a bad taste in people's mouths, especially lists. The older lists were always just ugly, not great.
Yeah, and they were clunky.
Exactly. So it's kind of interesting to talk to people, because then you have to kind of go through almost a consultation to say, okay, so the Dataverse database itself is going to cost money. You're probably going to need your own environment, which costs money. And then the licensing of the app itself could be per user, or what is it, per app or something like that? I don't even remember.
Per app.
But then you have to figure out, okay, what's your audience size? And invariably they're going to say, well, it could be anybody in the company. Okay, well, in that case, we can't do the per user, right? Unless you happen to have the funding to be the person that puts us over the hump and gets us to a critical mass.
There is pay as you go,
right? But we have to have and I've talked to a number of our account people with Power Platform side, and I'm like, do you guys have a decision tree? Because I feel like we're asking all the same questions, and we should be able to formalize that. And yes, we can spend a couple days of our time, my team's time, to figure that out and build something, but I shouldn't have to, because all of your customers are asking the same questions always. So you must have that, right? And I get the answer of, that's a good idea. No, we don't. I'm not aware of anything like that. And it's like, is this nefarious and you're just lying and you have something internally and you just won't give it to us because it does show that there's free ways to do this? Or are we just not that plugged into our customers? I'm not sure what the answer to that is. It's been not a great experience in that case. And now it's going to get worse, because more people are going to be needing Dataverse for this AI stuff to work.
Oh, and Microsoft, of course, is just, because you're seeing all the add-ons, all the new features and services that are paywalled. It is no coincidence that Microsoft is figuring out new ways to juice revenue.
Totally.
Right,
I appreciate you tolerating my rant about Dataverse and licensing.
I think this is shared sentiment across the board. I would hazard a guess, and I challenge all of you watching who have not skipped to the next chapter already.
So sick of hearing Matt Wade complain about Power Apps. He does it constantly. Anyway, go on.
Drop into the comments and let us know. Is this shared sentiment within your organization? Are you leveraging Dataverse? If not, is it licensing that's getting in the way? Is it the user friendliness of it that's getting in the way? I'll be curious to see what that output is.
Sure.
So coming back to Power Apps, we talked about create an app, the Power Apps version of describe it to design it. One thing that seems to be the case, and I'm hoping this isn't, but it probably is that they don't seem to have Copilot within the app itself to iterate on it further once the app has been built. Everything that I'm seeing here, at least in these initial blog posts, is that you describe it to design it. It shows you a preview of the data source that it's going to generate. You say, yes, that's perfect. Or you ask it a couple of questions, or you say, add a couple more columns. And then it spits it out into the canvas, the design studio. And from there, now you're just in Power Apps. I'm sure there's going to be more. I'm sure of it, because they already have design ideas baked into Power Apps. And they're clearly iterating and investing in that particular space. But it does not seem like Copilot is, at least not, again, in this initial announcement, doesn't really seem to be part of the I have an app, help me continue to build this app as we go along.
Yeah.
Like, it's not going to create a button for you. It's probably not writing the PowerFX function that takes you to the next screen and captures all the data on that form of the current screen you're on.
That being said, though, like the thing that is the biggest hurdle in Power Apps for me as a newish user still or designer is the syntax. What should I put in which property to make that thing happen? So like submitting a form, a Power Apps form on an app, that's on press or whatever, on select for a button can be the thing that says, submit dot form name. But then if you want it to go to a success screen, that's not where you include that. You do that upon the form, like on success or something like that, and then navigate, comma, fade or whatever, like that kind of stuff, considering how much ChatGPT is being used right now to build JSON, to write Python coding, to do all that coding. I feel like that's a no-brainer for being able to say like, hey, I want this button to submit that form, but I don't want the button, or I want the button to be active and enabled always, but to throw errors in each of the fields when a required one is missing because, or the data validation is wrong, because that's the best practice. You shouldn't disable buttons, like that kind of stuff. I feel like better be supported sometime soon after the initial launch, because like that's not a no-brainer, but like that makes it so I don't have to think so hard about the intricacies of Power Apps, which can really get kind of annoying sometimes.
Yeah, no, you're dead on. And I do want to add, because I'm sure somebody's going to jump into the comments if they haven't already, Microsoft did announce a GPT-3 powered version of natural language for PowerFX generation. It's built into the Ideas tab when you select an object, which I know they're phasing out in lieu of like click on an object, and there'll be a little Get Ideas button. Yeah. So it exists. It's just not paired with this Copilot stuff that we're talking about here, which is going to become a consistency problem very quickly. So it'll be interesting to see. I think we're probably, when we talk about Power Virtual Agents, you'll get a sense of what I'm talking about. I think we're getting some previews of what Power Apps version of that will look like through Power Virtual Agents, but remains to be seen. But they clearly have an eye towards that being a utility. It's just not here today.
So I'll have my pickiness here and there, but I am really excited about this. I think this is a really great move on the Power Apps side of things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So the other two things that I want to talk about in the Power App side of things, Copilot control for Power Apps. So the ability to embed Copilot into a Power App so that the user of the app can use Copilot to ask questions of a data source that you've connected it to, which is really interesting. Oh. So you can envision, and the example they give in the blog post, which again you can check out in the show notes, is a really simple, sparse, almost Google-esque text box in the middle of a screen of a tablet-sized app, and you can just ask questions about the data source that it's connected to. So that's interesting. It's technically interesting. I can't say that I immediately go like, I know exactly where I would use this, because I think everywhere that you might say that's useful, I think there's a stronger argument for leveraging Microsoft Search and their custom connectors, which not everybody will be able to do. But to create this like siloed search experience, chat experience for content that you can like ask questions for, it's just a scenario that I would need to see in practice in order to appreciate the utility, I think.
So I can give you two examples. First would be a basic IT knowledge base or HR knowledge base or procurement knowledge base where each item was saved in a list or Dataverse. And the content that was listed as the knowledge or the answer or the here's how you do generally, blah, 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 as long as it's complete and like provides good context, this is just like a search. If the content doesn't exist, it's not going to be magicked into place, right? But that I could definitely see. And then depending on whether or not it can connect to or touch objects like files with content, so PDFs or Word documents, and like run through all the content in that too, that could be an even more powerful knowledge base where like you have all the design documents related to a project and you want to know, why was the thickness of, or why was the bevel of this phone design this number? And the answer can come back based on the design document. It looks like this. That could be super cool, I think.
Yeah, and I think those are really good examples. And I guess in this last feature in Power Apps that we'll talk about here, we'll probably speak to or might confusion is that they've also announced a Power Virtual Agents integration. And what you're describing sounds like a great scenario for Power Virtual Agents. This back and forth conversation, especially with the conversation boosters feature that they announced a couple of months back, that leverages ChatGPT to search content and generate answers, as opposed to where Power Virtual Agents previously you kind of had to say, like, when they say this, you say this,
right? Yeah.
To be able to like spin content up. That feels like a really great use case of the scenario you're describing. And that's where I'm like, the Copilot control in Power Apps, I need to touch it, I guess, to really appreciate where we're going with it. Because right now the marketing is technically interesting, but in execution, I am genuinely grasping at like, where is this going to be useful? Where Power Virtual Agents doesn't make a ton of sense. And honestly, maybe it's a licensing thing. Like maybe that just the ability to skip out on having to deal with Power Virtual Agents licensing is the utility.
Yeah, maybe. Anything to simplify your licensing model.
Anything.
Right.
Anything. Was there anything else in Power Apps that I missed? I'm sure I missed something.
Not that I can remember. I did read through all the blog posts, but I think all the big details that you brought up were good.
In case anybody is like, you guys, you didn't talk about this, drop it in the comments, please.
Go for it. Bring it on.
Rest assured, I have an opinion, even if I can't remember it right now. The second thing that I want to talk about, which I imagine will be a relatively quick one, is Power Automate. So Power Automate, Microsoft made some big announcements with respect to Copilot. They also made some iterative announcements with respect to what they've been calling describe it to design it, which is, can I just say, like, the inconsistency with what this is called between Power App Surface or Power Platform Services is really starting to drive me up a wall. Mm-hmm. So in Power Apps, it's create an app. In Power Automate, it's describe it to design it.
Both of which are the same concept. Like if they just went with describe it to design it and just went across all of their services, that would be, but no.
Yeah, no, of course not. That would be too easy.
Yeah.
So the describe it to design it, which was in preview already, they announced will support more actions, more connectors than just the Microsoft out of the box connectors, which is great. I mean, people use Salesforce, people use Slack and Box and Asana and SurveyMonkey. So to be able to say, when a user submits a SurveyMonkey form, create a record in Salesforce, like those are the kinds of things that are going to be meaningful to organizations that aren't vertically down the line Microsoft shops like my organization. This is super useful for, when a new visualization is spun up in ArcGIS. Make a record with a link to it in this SharePoint list that reflects on a SharePoint site somewhere. So I'm glad to see them continuing to invest in that space, but they also announced that they're bolting on Copilot. So the ability to, within a Power Automate flow, to be able to continue to iterate, ask questions and get assistance when it comes to building and enhancing the flow as it exists today. So helping with, creating a choice, or not a choice, a condition action. Like those are going to be really useful things. There's an individual within my organization right now who's just starting to get into Power Automate, and he's asking all the same questions that I asked when I got started, that you asked, Matt, when you got started, that we all ask. And thankfully, this platform, it has such a cult of a community that most of the answers you need are out there somewhere, typically within Microsoft's own documentation. So it stands to reason that if you train an AI model based on just that documentation alone, you can get some pretty good answers out of it if you're able to take the natural language and parse it into what they actually are looking for.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in that Copilot within the editing experience. I got to be honest, the describe it to design it, just given where I stand in this space, usually not super useful. Like Power Apps, totally useful.
Yeah.
Power Automate, it's one foot in front of the other. So I typically, I'm not thinking about every action that I'm going to need down the line.
Yeah, I think for very new people or very, very non-technical people, I think that design it or describe it to design it will be helpful because, half of the workflows that I make are somebody submits a Microsoft form or adds a new item to a SharePoint list, and I send out a confirmation email and a notification to the process owner. And like, I could describe that, but I feel like it's actually quicker for me because I already know how to get the steps that I need to go in there. And in fact, I do it so often that I have a couple templates that I can just create a copy of and then just change the source trigger and then move forward with that. So yeah, but for somebody who opens it up and says create the first time, and they're like, they have 5 different flow types to choose from, all of which are not super obvious what they do. And then once you choose the automated flow for, a trigger for if a form gets submitted, then they get asked, okay, what's the trigger that you want? And here are the 5 most common triggers that people have, but go ahead and search. And like, search for what? Like, your first time is kind of difficult if you don't have somebody guiding you through.
It's super difficult. It's overwhelming. You have to explain. You have to understand that there are connectors and that there are actions and triggers within the connectors, which is not intuitive by any stretch. So I agree. Like, for the greenfield, like, I'm just starting. I don't understand this. I just know what the end state is supposed to be. Describing a design is going to be super useful as an on-ramp.
To the marketing team and to like Charles Lamana's credit, when they said in one of the videos that this like even further democratizes automation and like workflow building, I think that is a completely valid and not fluffy statement to make.
Yeah, absolutely. My only concern is if they ever start to prioritize premium actions where there are free ones.
Ooh. Oh, there's so many ethical quandaries in this stuff. Ugh.
There are some open questions there.
Yeah.
But I to close the loop on that, I am very excited about within the Power Automate experience, because it does not matter how great you are at building a Power Automate flow. There are always going to be weird errors and bumps, or what's the best way to do this. And, in full candor, and many, I know of the self-proclaimed flow fam that exist out there, who leverage Power Automate, and we all talk to each other. They're leveraging ChatGPT and Bing AI to see what best practices are suggested just based on what it's been trained on. So imagine a purpose-built model for this. I'm very excited. The last thing in Power Automate that I'll highlight here is that AI Builder, the AI Builder connector, is getting an enhancement for desktop to achieve feature parity, roughly, with the cloud flows that exist today. The ability to, the action is create text with GPT, which I have thoughts on the name, but the idea is that it's a singular action within AI Builder that you can inject into a flow and say, like, great, either take text that exists and use it as part of the variable to generate new content, or you can say just create net new content and drop it in here. Keep going, keep with the flow. Very useful, super interesting. Opens a question about AI Builder credits, which on the desktop, I assume AI Builder credits are a thing on desktop. I know they are in the cloud, which is a licensing concern. But I want to come back to the action for the action being called create text with GPT. Matt Wade, have we jumped the shark on just assuming everybody knows what GPT is?
Oh, I think that's a fair assessment. Yeah,
that is a bad name.
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely a bad name. Yeah. Also, just create text
with AI.
Yeah, or make AI generated text or something, or generate AI text. Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess that could be just
generate text. Like generate text would be a good one.
Oh, generate. Yeah, I like generate. Yeah, because that means that you're not just. Yeah. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, generate text. Done. We solved it. That create text with GPT is assuming a level of understanding. Like, I understand that ChatGPT has taken the world by storm, but this is a microcosm. We are in a bubble.
Yeah,
the majority of people, the overwhelming majority of people that exist in the world have no idea what you're talking about. And unless you've intentionally gated this name to throw people off the trail so that they don't use it, so that only the nerds use it while you're figuring it out, this is a bad name.
Yeah, agreed. Well, anyway, we fixed it for them. They're welcome.
You're welcome.
Money, please.
All right, so that's Power Automate. Excited, iterative in some respects, also kind of quintessentially just bolting on AI to see what they can do with it. but exciting nonetheless. The last one that I want to talk about here is Power Virtual Agents. Now, Power Virtual Agents has the same kind of two pillars of Copilot support. Create it with Copilot, which is the third way that they've used the same describe it to design it. So we've got Power Apps, create an app. Power Automate, describe it to design it. And Power Virtual Agents, create it with Copilot. Those are your three wildly different ways of describing the exact same functionality.
That's a triangle of Spider-Mans pointing to each other.
Yeah, come on. They're all doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So let's get some consistency in that. Like, is there nobody looking at all these demos and going, wait a minute, this is the same, but we're calling it this? Shouldn't we? Maybe this is like the weirdest A/B test ever to see like which platform gets more use out of that initial functionality before they pick a common name.
That would be an awful idea, though, because the number of people that use one app versus the other, like PVA's usage has to be incredibly low compared to Power Apps. You know, like
100%.
Yeah. Oh, that would be an awful justification for that. If you did the A/B testing,
my generous benefit of the doubt
in app, then sure, you have to have the same audience, though. You know, like
yeah. That was my generous, like, maybe they're doing that. I don't think they're doing that. I think this is just a lack of polish and consistency across what is supposed to be a unified platform.
The platform, yes.
So create it with Copilot, the ability to describe what kind of Power Virtual Agent you want, what you want it to do. It gives a couple of examples, whether it's, helping to bring users in and ask questions about your IT help desk, or intake somebody that's going to be requesting a return, or just basic customer service scenarios. The kinds of things that you can envision offloading the burden from somebody who's in a call center, somebody who's at a help desk of any sort. Like, again, these customer facing scenarios.
But that's a really
describe that
positive way to represent that. Offloading the burden is a very nice way of saying kill those jobs. But yes, go on.
No, it's killing the front line of that, so that everybody who's on the front line can up level and focus on the people who beat the AI.
Yep, that's definitely how that works in practice. Anyway,
and then the second piece to this, beyond creating with Copilot, which will again get you over that blank canvas hump, which I am eternally grateful for the concept of, is edit with Copilot. So the idea that you are in a Power Virtual Agent, I don't know what they call it, Power Virtual Agent topic. I think that's what they call it, topics.
So,
yeah. So you're in a Power Virtual Agent topic, and from there you're able to say, okay, I need, one of the examples that they gave in the blog post, which I really liked, was generate a additional variation of a question for all questions in this topic. So,
I love that idea.
Like, one of the big critiques of Power Virtual Agents is they don't feel very intelligent because they run off of a script.
Correct.
But if you could have 2 or 3, doesn't have to be that many, 2 or 3 different variations of the same question, just to create a little bit of dynamism in there.
Yep.
That's a small, dumb thing, but it's also a very useful thing to offload onto Copilot.
Totally.
You can also say, well, I want to ask the user a question, date of birth, social security number, reason for reaching out, and I want to spit all that back out in an adaptive card for the user so that they can confirm that's the thing. So you can dump all that into Copilot, and presumably the output is going to be exactly that. Ask the question, spit it out in a summary, and an adaptive card. So there's a
perfect example of them using that service to do code-based stuff, right? It's all spitting it out in JSON. I just want it for Power Apps syntax.
Yeah, and this actually comes back to what I alluded to earlier with respect to Power Apps, and I think Power Automate's going to have some of this functionality when it launches. Power Apps, again, no indication that they're embedding this into the design studio experience just yet. I think what we're seeing in Power Virtual Agents, which is that there's a scope context. So you can click on one of the actions in Power Virtual Agents and then type your AI stuff. And Power Virtual Agents will know, you're talking about just this thing. And I think that that's going to be the case for, Power Apps. Click on the button and say, when somebody clicks this button, go to the next screen, but save all the data in these 4 fields into this variable or something like that. I think we're probably getting a little bit of a sneak preview. Obviously, it's more technically complex because especially with Canvas apps, those buttons and forms and fields could be anywhere. And they could be named any dumb thing.
Yep.
So it's going to be tricky to create a user-friendly experience based on that. But it's clear that they're trying different paradigms across the different Power Platform services to see what works.
So I think on this one specifically, it's going to be interesting to see how much you were able to interact with and use GPT tech behind or as part of the chatbot experience, because eventually you shouldn't have to run through this whole, come up with 3 versions of asking the same question. It should be, you should be able to pull in the GPT technology to just kind of run with tell it what you want to do. And There isn't dedicated steps in that chatbot's workflow. It just does what it's supposed to do. And when the person comes back with a response that's inaccurate or unexpected, the GPT service should be able to identify that just by looking at it and say, hey, sorry, this isn't what I'm looking for. Do you need some help? I can provide more detail, yes or no, whatever. And then I'm kind of curious what happens if it gets so connected that, so Bing AI, for example, I think they're up to 15 responses now that they allow before a session? 20? Okay. So, but eventually you're going to have that kind of same session potential issue with a chatbot that you build off of this, which I think is going to be kind of an interesting thing. And then also, as we all move forward using these features inside of these tools, the changes are going to be coming so fast. Like GPT-3 came out, mid last year? 3.5 came out December, and then 4 just came out. Yes. That's a rapid change in the model quality. Then you have to test it and prove that that 4 is still meeting the, the AI ethics standards and whatever before you can really make it available. And I'm curious to see how people doing everyday things are going to tolerate the rate of change of the underlying services they decide to use and what responsibility they will actually take with that, because things can change on them and cause unpredictable outcomes within their solutions that they build as this stuff becomes that much more ingrained in the tools.
Matt, I think what you're describing is the AI models being usefully wrong, which the data shows.
It helps you learn and then build better things by finding an error or an incorrection or something bad that pops through. The amount
of BS that they threw out of it could be wrong, but how great of a problem that is.
But you have to give them credit. That was the level of propaganda. Yeah. Oh, it was good. I mean, I think Kim Jong-un was calling up to ask for some consulting potentially on the propaganda quality. But
a past administration would have said, not these are alternative facts, that these are usefully wrong responses, because we want to challenge. We want to challenge the population to really take a critical look at the representatives.
Did you notice what we said was wrong? Oh, you didn't? Oh boy, we're really working on that education system. We're going to keep putting out wrong facts just to show you how much more effort you need to put into your life. Anyway, yeah.
It seems some children were left behind after all.
Oh my goodness, it's just.
So those are the 3 big areas where we saw Copilot introduced into the Power Platform: Power Automate, Power Apps, Power Virtual Agents. In all 3 instances, broadly the same functionality, which is the ability to either design it to describe it, create an app, or create it with Copilot. Or, with the exception of Power Apps, again, this may very well have just been buried in a blog post. So if it is the case and I'm wrong, please call me out. With the exception of Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power Virtual Agents, the ability to iterate and continue to build, add new actions, because those are very structured. I imagine it's a little bit easier to just drop an action in or enhance it. Those sound very simple conceptually in terms of, they just dumped it on there. But I think the utility of it is going to be such an interesting thing for the average user. And even for the experienced maker. that's going to be really compelling, I think, for me, because right now I've got 2 tabs open at any given moment. I've got my Flow or my Power app, and I've got Bing,
my research,
or ChatGPT. Yeah, I've got
totally.
An action fails, and I jump over to Bing and I paste it in there, and I say, I'm
Copy
building a
error
thing that's supposed to
message.
do this.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And sometimes I get Bing responds, well, that looks like it's a Windows domain issue, and I'm like,
or better yet, no matches when you put it in quotes. You're like, wait a minute, hold on.
Trailblazer. But those are, to merge those into a single and purpose-built experience for Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Virtual Agents, and ultimately, hopefully, Power BI and Power Pages. I mean, that's pretty compelling, and we're just at the tip of the iceberg here.
Yeah.
Somebody said something interesting, which is we are in the earliest days of PHP. Which was back when like PHP was just becoming a thing. People were doing very, very simple kind of carbon copies of each other. We were all just throwing the same 4 things at the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And as time progressed, people understood the technology evolved, and we were able to validate, we were able to templatize, we were able to create case studies and white papers that really kind of articulated, if you want to do this, here is the true like enterprise grade way to do something versus Hello World, but with a slightly different shade of blue.
Yeah.
We're in the earliest days of what AI can do. And right now we're all just throwing at like, what if we put a chat box to the right of it and it can do some stuff, but I'm excited.
Yeah.
We set it up at the top. Yeah. Our last episode, fanboy, like the world was far more interested when Viva got announced than when this got announced, numbers wise.
Yeah.
But the amount of impact that this is going to have is infinite. Like, this is absolutely a turning point in the way that we interface with technology. And I'm excited.
So in the initial AI event, Jared had said something that I thought was pretty good.
100 years from now, we're going to look back on this moment and say that was the beginning of the truly digital era.
I know that sounds really profound because like we've been digital since the 80s, 70s in everyday life things. But I think there's some truth to that this is going to be that inflection point where the graph starts the hockey stick model, where we've moved very fast and very, very much, but the amount of progression we're going to see over the next decades is going to be significantly faster and a much greater, rise over time than we saw in the last 50 years.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking about invention of the computer, internet, democratized AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like at least in terms of like connectivity. Obviously, you can make an argument about like, now I have a phone. But in terms of like access to data, we're now beyond accessing data. We are now generating data in real time.
Yeah. And when you think about it, what we actually have in our pockets, when you mention phones, like it serves us, we kind of serve it, right? We have to tell it to go to this app, to open that thing, to go read something or post something or reply to an email or whatever else. And I think this is that turning point where it's going to work more for us. Like just thinking about how bad Siri is, right? In the Apple ecosystem.
So bad.
Right? Google Assistant is better, but it's not ChatGPT.
Not by much.
Not even close, right? And when that stuff gets built in, like I'll say even now at this point, I use Bing AI. This is the only time I've ever downloaded the Bing app for my phone, and it's strictly to have Bing AI available. And it's actually kind of annoying because it still pushes you to the search experience in the app, not to the chat. And then when you bring the chat up, it actually like brings up like a drawer up like 90% of the way, and it's like, I don't want a drawer. I want the chat app.
This
like
is
just
the
give
whole
me the
experience.
Just give me the app. Like just,
I don't
like
want
that.
your crap news. I don't want the
Right.
weather. I want a chat.
Yes, and I don't want it to be like like you pulled it open on top of the app. I want it to be the app, right? Have tabs at the bottom or something where I can jump between search, chat, whatever else you want me to look at. But I want the chat app to be, or the chat experience to be ingrained and actually part of it. Because like right now on iOS, like it's a nitpick, But if I want to like tap and hold to grab text, like they haven't made that work correctly yet because the send button is like in the way. So like there's a lot of detail stuff that they haven't figured out yet, which is dumb because they're really trying to get this in the hands of people. And what is the best way to get in the hands of somebody than to use their phone, right? And it's just not a great UX yet. And again, super small paper cut kind of thing, but like if that's stopping me from sending my message, then I'm not using your service, you know? So I don't know. It's we'll see. But that kind of stuff I think is the next step. Is how do you make the phone, the device that you have, work for you more? And there's a great episode of 99PI maybe last year talking about how bad search is in like your personal emails. And it's because, you know, let's say Gmail has minimal incentive to make search good. Right. And when you're looking for that old email that you're trying to get, like if you don't know when they sent it and who sent it, you're kind of sometimes SOL. And in theory, this stuff, you know, Google can hook that stuff up to Bard, and Bard can go through and actually like do a good search experience and find that thing or answer the question directly. So when you say to your email client, you know, when, Sally emailed me about that happy hour that everybody's going to for so-and-so's retirement, like, when is that? It should just be able to come back and say, it's at this time. And then you tap to click to open up the source if you want to, but like, you can't do that right now, you know? And there's going to be a major change in how people interact with their devices. And I think, you know, we talked last time, I had said how the older generations today are going to have a really hard time sort of working with this stuff because it's not the way that they work with technology. Yeah. They're used to pressing buttons. They're not used to interacting with actual like error handling things that aren't pre-programmed to error handle.
They're not used to thinking in syntax.
Right.
We have had to, you know, Boolean search operators and the like.
Yep. But even so, I think our generation too, I think millennials are kind of on the cusp of, we can tolerate this and potentially grab onto it. But I think those younger generations are going to, you know, Z and even Alpha, and especially Alpha, if they start using this day to day,
just like, is that the next one, Alpha?
I think so. Yeah. I saw a reference to it the other day. What are you going to do? But like the fact that millennials kids are, you know, or not even that, not just millennials kids, but like when the iPad came out, one of those notable things was that a baby could use an iPad because the design was so intuitive and just made sense.
And likewise would transpose that same mechanic onto like a magazine and try to like pinch to zoom.
Right. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that's going to be a thing where that next generation is going to start using this stuff, and it's going to be 100% natural. And the next technology thing that happens when they're in their 30s or 40s is going to like disadvantage them a little bit, and their next generation is going to be all over it, or even faster, because it might be the 20-somethings instead of the 30-somethings because the technology moves so fast. It's really kind of fascinating to think about the futurology.
It is really fascinating. Yeah, like I'm simultaneously terrified because I know I'm going to be on the other side of so much of it. But also nonetheless excited to have a window seat to the ride. Yeah,
definitely. It's probably worth mentioning too, is kind of segues, because we talked about, we don't know what's coming to Power BI, we don't know what's coming to Power Pages, but I had stumbled across, I don't know how their advertising worked on this, but Microsoft is hosting on April 4th, which will be tomorrow, if you watch this on the Monday when we release this. They are having their Microsoft Business Applications launch event. It's going to be an hour-and-a-half long event online, 9 a.m. Pacific time, which is UTC -7, if I remember correctly. And it looks like they're going to be talking about their 2023 release Wave 1 event, Wave 1 stuff, which if they're spending 90 minutes on this stuff, there's a reasonable chance they're going to deep dive more into the stuff that we talked about in this video. But also I have a feeling there's some potential that they're going to give some sneak peeks on what they are going to be doing for some of those other apps, or potentially more detail on what they're putting into the 3 that we did talk about today.
Yeah, no, I stumbled upon it, same as you. I was like, what? You know, I think it popped up as a little thing when I was in the Maker portal. I completely almost missed this entirely. So as we're publishing this, that will be tomorrow. We'll drop a link in the show notes so you can register. We will be paying attention to it. We, depending on what they announce, may or may not talk about it in our upcoming episode, but nonetheless, check it out. I think it'll be a really good picture of what their roadmap is going to look like between now and, I believe, August. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, I think that about does it. This is a long episode, but we had a lot of deep diving in cool what ifs to talk about with this new tech rolling into the Power Platform. In addition to check out last episode to see what we talked about with relation to Microsoft Teams, the rest of the Microsoft 365 suite, the apps, especially Word, Excel, PowerPoint. And so we're really excited about this. So thanks so much for watching. As always, a like and subscribe is much appreciated. Leave a comment below to get that conversation started. We're really interested in actually hearing, what are you thinking? Where do you see this stuff being useful for you, for your colleagues, for the people that you support in this stuff? And so next episode, we'll probably be talking about a little bit into the Teams updates, including Teams 2.0, if we don't get something super juicy out of that event on the 4th. But so Sean, thanks so much for joining me this week, and can't wait to hang out with you and everybody else again in our next episode.